Greetings. Welcome to another Sunday video where we reflect on the words of Jesus. And we do this to open ourselves to the sacred. The sacred is simply God's presence, God's life, God's truth, God's beauty, and God's goodness. And to the extent that we open ourselves to the sacred and align our minds and hearts to the sacred, then our lives become a divine affair. We are literally living the divine life, not just in some future heaven, but here and now. The theme in today's gospel is one we all can relate to, or at least we all long for, and that's the theme of peace. It may be hard to always define peace, but we know it when we are experiencing it. There's a sense of wellness, a sense of wholeness. We can exhale. We can relax. Things feel integrated on the inside. Now, there are two forms of peace, and it's very important to differentiate these two forms of peace. There's a kind of peace that happens when the external circumstances around us are pleasing, when they're easy, when they're pleasant, when they're good. I'll give you an example. This morning, my wife and I had coffee on our deck, and it was the quintessential spring morning. The sun was shining, the temperature was perfect, no humidity. The birds were singing. We were surrounded by trees and green and grass. It was externally a perfect moment. And in that context, it was easy to let go. It was easy to have some level of peace. But this is the problem. This afternoon, we're supposed to get a lot of rain. In a month or two, it's going to be so hot that often it'll be unpleasant to sit on our deck. The fall will come, and then we'll have some more pleasant weather, and then the winter will come. And in upstate New York, the winters are very severe. They're cold, they're dark, and they're long. And we won't be able to sit on the deck. And so that form of peace is not going to be available to us. So what I'm saying is that there's a kind of peace that is dependent on circumstances. I will be peaceful if everything in my external life is well. My kids are healthy and thriving, the stock market's doing well, I'm physically healthy, so on and so forth. There's nothing wrong with enjoying those moments in life, but they never last. They are going to change. And if our sense of peace is dependent on them, then it's a very, very fragile peace. And it's not the kind of spiritual peace that we're interested in. So in that spirit, I want to read a portion from today's gospel. And the context is very important because it's a paradoxical context. Jesus is with his disciples, and it's the night before he's going to be crucified. These external circumstances are not pleasant, they're not easy. But paradoxically, Jesus says to them, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives it, do I give peace to you. So do not let your heart be troubled or afraid." Do not let your heart be troubled or afraid. Jesus is talking about a transcendental peace. He's talking about a peace that comes from our sense of communion with God. When we experience God in a direct and intuitive way, one of the manifestations of that experience is peace. Now, the good news is that peace is not dependent on anything external. It's coming from the inside out. And even at a deeper level, the good news is that God is always inside of us. Therefore, we have access to this ever-present transcendental peace. Jesus, in another part of the gospel, says, the kingdom of God is neither here nor there. It is within you. Let me say it this way. At the very depth of our being, our spirit is perpetually touching God's spirit. And if we learn to go within, to let go of the outside world, and to go within and touch that divine presence in the very depths of our being, we can experience that peace. And it's possible, even when we are engaged in the outer world, even when the outer world isn't being pleasant to us, even when it's not meeting our expectations, it's possible to have a foot in that peace. It truly is, if we learn to live from the inside out. So I want to talk about how we do that. The first thing is, I drive this home all the time. Without a contemplative practice, without meditation, without a way of going within, we will not be able to ground ourselves in this transcendental peace, in God's peace. Meditation is not for the purpose of having fantastic experiences. It's so that we can experience communion with God. And in that state of communion, we can begin to taste and touch and nurture this sense of peace. And this is the paradox. As we nurture this sense of peace, then the wisdom of God flows, the strength of God flows, the love of God flows, and we respond much better to our external circumstances. And we exert a positive spiritual influence on these external circumstances so that we are then empowered to create a life that supports the peace and is orderly and is loving and is filled with light, so that our outside world matches our inside world. But again, it's not going to happen without some sense of a contemplative practice, without some sense of meditation, going inside, breathing in, pausing, exhaling, breathing in, pausing, touching our souls, touching that place where we are perpetually in communion with God, and then learning to live from that space. But again, it begins with meditation and contemplative prayer. All right, so the second step in nurturing this transcendental peace is we have to let go of our happiness projects. We have to let go of wanting the world to be a certain way in order for us to feel peace. I'm going to say it a little bit differently. We're all addicted to wanting the external circumstances to be the way we want them to be. Because when they match, when these external circumstances are what we want them to be, we have a moment of happiness. And don't misunderstand me. There's nothing wrong with enjoying pleasant circumstances, but if we're attached to them, then our peace is very fragile. So we, again, have to let go of wanting things to be a certain way. Now, in order to do that, we have to pray and meditate. We have to have that intuitive sense of God's presence. And we have to trust God. We have to believe that there's a bigger picture, that everything that is happening is ultimately serving our highest good and the highest good of others. That makes it easier to let go and to live from the inside out. That's what great saints do. They've learned to live from the inside out. Let me tell a story about St. Francis of Assisi. Now, he's using the word joy, but joy and peace are just at different points on the divine spectrum. Peace and joy are just two manifestations of God's love, God's life, and our conscious contact with God. So you can use You can replace Francis's word joy with peace. So Francis is traveling with one of his friars, one of his disciples, I think it was Brother Leo. And I'm paraphrasing, but it's pretty close to the story. Francis says to Brother Leo, tell me what perfect peace is. And Brother Leo says, perfect peace is if you preach to the whole world and the whole world was converted to God. Francis said, that's good, but that's not perfect peace. Perfect peace would be that anybody you prayed for would be healed from their sicknesses. Francis says that would be good, but that's not perfect peace or perfect joy. Perfect peace and joy would be if you could call down the angels and the angels would walk with us in a visible way. That would be perfect joy and perfect peace. Francis says, no, that's not perfect joy. It's not perfect peace. So Leo says, okay, please tell me what perfect peace is. And Francis said, perfect peace would be if we went to one of our monasteries or friaries and it was cold and damp and muddy out, and we knocked on the door and we said, please give us some shelter tonight and give us some dry clothes and give us some food. And they said, no, get out of here, you scoundrels. And they threw us in the mud and left us there. That would be perfect peace. Now, was Francis a masochist? No. What Francis was saying is that when we are living from our interior depths, from that conscious contact with God, then we know the peace that Jesus was talking about. It's not dependent on circumstances. It flows from God's constant presence in us and our consciousness of that presence. So the third piece of advice and practice I'm going to give you today may surprise you. It's the gift of laughter. And I want to return to about 6 weeks ago, we had this beautiful Kriya teacher from California, Isha, come visit us, and she gave a great retreat. And she talked about the importance of laughter. And she had this insight that I've been reflecting on ever since her visit. She said, when you're really laughing, particularly wholesome laughter, she said, you're not in the past and you're not in the future. You are in the present, not just here and now, but you are in the present/present. It's almost like for a period of time, you step out of time and you're just fully present. You're just fully, absolutely present. And when you're laughing, it's a kind of joy. And then there's an afterglow of joy, which is peace. So a very simple practice is find reasons to laugh. Every day, every evening, my wife and I will go through some videos, short videos we've picked up on YouTube or Facebook, where there's just some healthy humor, life-giving jokes and circumstances, and we laugh together. When we laugh, particularly if it's a full belly laugh, we let go of a lot of tension that is inside of us. We release. And in that release and in that just being in the precious presence, in the precious present, we have joy, and then we have the peace that emanates with joy. Now, I'm going to close with a quote from Yogananda. And what this quote is telling us is that nurturing this interior peace is one of the most practical things that we can do. See, when we look at the external circumstances in our life or the world, and a lot of times we go at it trying to fix it in a way that is backwards. Let me pour all my time and energy on the circumstance, trying to fix the circumstance. And at some level that's helpful, but we have to see the priority. If there's going to be peace in our lives and peace in the world, it has to come from the inside out. When we are tapping into this peace that Jesus is talking about, the peace that surpasses all understanding, we emanate a force to our family, we emanate a force to our friends, we emanate a force to the world that really tilts the world and the circumstances in our lives in a way that is loving and healthy and creates external peace. But again, external peace is always the reflection of internal peace. So I want to close with this quote from Paramahansa Yogananda. I believe that if every citizen in the world is taught to commune with God, not merely to know him intellectually, but to truly commune with God, then peace can reign, but not before. When by persistence in meditation you realize God through communion with him, your heart is prepared to embrace all of humanity. And I'll just add, your heart is ready to be a conduit for peace. Have a great day. God bless you. Namaste.